This is insanity. I like to quote Albert Einstein. He said that when he was asked what he thought the basic difference between genius and stupidity was, and he never even blinked, he just said, genius has its limits.
Could our way of life collapse? Could industrial civilization collapse? And I think it's a genuine worry.
We have tremendous problems generated by ourselves and limited mental capacity to deal with them. There's no doubt in my mind, none whatsoever, that there are catastrophes looming for our children and grandchildren that are almost unimaginable to us.
We've built this magnificent set of structures that empowers us, but you have to put quotes around that word because we're not really empowered. If anything breaks down in that system, or conversely, if we decide the system is unsustainable, that there are problems in that system, we're really stuck.
This is what I see as the greatest threat to our future, where complexity and costliness make it impossible to solve our problems as we've been accustomed to doing.
Each time we get a wake-up call, as we now like to call it, we wake up briefly and then we go right back to, I'll think about that tomorrow.
There are huge concepts here, like what is reality, what is truth?
We're 3 and 4 generations away from the farm. We've got people that think that there's a machine in the back of the Piggly Wiggly that makes the food. I mean, they have no idea. You know, the west coast of this nation has 5 days of food, 5 days.
We are playing an intrinsically dangerous game because we are cutting ourselves off from reality, and that can come back and not just to haunt us, but we can smack into reality in a very dramatic way because it's unexpected.
To deal with climate change only on the level of political theory or on the level of scientific facts is extremely superficial. We have to investigate what it is in the deep structure of the human mind that just makes us unable to move in the face of cognitive, intellectual insight into the facts, but even also in the face of conscious experience of the situation we find ourselves.
As a species, we have evolved under natural selection, just as all animal species evolved. And in our history, there was never selective pressure. There was never pressure to think more broadly in terms of either time or space. And so humans didn't evolve to do so. Yet that's precisely what sustainability today requires. Particularly, it requires us to understand the distant past, because the distant past gives us lessons, and it also tells us how we came to be in the circumstances that we're in today. And we have to understand how to take the lessons of the past and project them into the future. We have to anticipate what the future is going to be like. Humans don't tend to think in terms of the long-term future. They think in terms of the immediacy of their lives.
Obviously, if we're concerned about the future of humanity, the future of our planet, we have to really think in terms of the future. We have to think in the long term. Natural selection doesn't do that, never has done that. There is no foresight, there is no forethought, no looking ahead in nature. The human species is the only species that has even the slightest chance of looking ahead, the slightest chance of using foresight. And we do, and we are, in a way, the best hope for the future of the world because of that. But nevertheless, we've got strong relics of our evolutionary past. It's a struggle for us to break away from the lack of foresight, the short-termness which bedevils the whole of the rest of the natural world.
looking at our evolutionary history essentially tells us where we come from and why we are the way we are to this day. But it doesn't really tell us where we're going.
We're in a world now where the future matters, and yet we're still wired for the here and now.
Evolution has invented many things. It has invented emotions, it has invented color vision, it has invented the conscious sense of selfhood, and it has obviously also invented self-deception.
We now have changed every cubic metre of air and water, and every hectare of land on Earth now has a human imprint. We are moving into a new era, and the question is, are we the kind of creature, are we the kind of being that can handle this new epoch, the Anthropocene, that we have created?
Throughout history there's been conflict, but actually humans are really evolved to get on with each other in groups. It's when those groups are in conflict, fighting over the resources, that you have the wars and the battles. And of course you can always land grab for more territory. But what happens when you run out of territory? What happens when you run out of land?
There's almost nothing we can exploit in terms of space on this planet anymore. We're exploiting time now. So we're destroying the quality of life of future human beings on this planet. We know that we do it.
The Aina is our land, yeah, the Aina.
Why do certain groups, even those who aren't perpetuating a problem, why are they taking action to benefit future generations in ways that would, say, help them overcome problems of climate change?
The Hawaiian word ai is to eat, or mea ai is the food. So Aina is the land, mea ai is the food.
And just this area alone here, we know could feed families. It could feed a lot of people. And once we get it going, it's just maintaining it and keeping it in production.
Whatever we put into the Aina, we put into our body. So if you put poison into the Aina, you're only going to put poison into yourself. If you put good mana, good life force into the Aina, you put it into yourself. Yeah, so we are all connected, the body and the Aina. So no matter where you are, you always have Aina. You take care of your Aina. You malama Aina. You taking care of your ancestral lands, because our ancestors are buried in the Aina, the bones. So we always walk with them, especially when you come into a place like this. They're all around us. And so it is our kuleana, our responsibility to maka'ala, to become aware, to raise your awareness of your kupuna and of your ancestral lands, which is inside here. This whole kino, the body and the Aina, is one.
People do things largely because, in one way or another, enhances their own well-being and enhances their own interests and welfare. The difference is what people do to enhance their well-being.
So kupuna, our ancestors, they utilize aquaculture and agriculture, yeah? And they integrate the two. So not only we can farm the food, but we can farm fish along with the food.
If you live in a farming society where there's all kinds of things that, affect your survival chances, future-orientedness suddenly becomes a matter of life and death. It becomes really important.
And we live down over here. This is the last 4 farms that are remaining out of all this area.
Polynesians developed a highly complex society in Hawaii that was sustainable entirely on local resources. They had no hope of getting resources from outside, and they didn't need resources from outside.
The psychology necessary for that future-orientedness. One way in which it's cultivated is through the development of deep genealogies, where you think about your ancestors going back through numerous generations and then project forward.
Our kupuna had it figured out. They had to figure it out. Because we're on this island. There's no place to go. Captain James Cook came, over 1 million Hawaiians living in the islands, 1 million. After 2,000 years of living out here in isolation, they were 1 million strong. Today, we have about 1.2, maybe 1.4 million people today. We import 90% of our food. We're 90% dependent on fossil fuels. And we still get people homeless. Yeah. Whatever we take, we want to make sure that the next guy that come after us enjoy the same things we enjoy.
Common psychological instinct when faced with a problem is to try to figure out who the antagonist is or who the perpetrator of the problem is. Ultimately, we all do things that serve our own interests, but the things that we do have different implications for people.
What's taught to me, everything we do today impact the next 7 generations, the next 7, brah. Just think about this. What if there was no more barges, no more boats, no more ships, no more airplanes flying into Hawaii? How many of you guys think we're going to survive?
Hawaii is an example of how we have transformed places and ourselves from environments in which humans and the environment were symbiotic to environments that can only be sustained by continual input of outside resources, all ultimately dependent on fossil fuels.
And here we are in the wettest place in the world.
Yeah.
And we drink bottled water.
I know.
We can consume most anything we want. And so we tend to think, since we grew up in such a society, that this is the normal human condition. In fact, it's not normal. It's highly unusual in human history. And there are questions about how long it can continue.
The golf course takes a lot of water. They own several springs on their side, rivers. It's the fertile resources and the food producing areas and the medicine areas and all the upland areas that they own and really don't probably have an idea of what they have under their control.
Our local ia is our food stock, our refrigerator, our cabinet, our food source. So we want to build this wall. We want to bring the rocks back up to the highest point of the highest tide. And so what we want to do is we want to farm the fish, and we want to use the natural life cycle of the fish so we don't overtake. We are all in the same canoe. We're in the middle of the Pacific Ocean on these little islands, these little specks. No place to go. As Hawaiians, we understand that concept that these guys are the ones that are going to live forever, but our time is so short.
How would it change if there were no legacy of me, of you, of any of us? I think that would profoundly alter the way we think about ourselves, our lives, and our place on this planet.
This is the pula pula. This is the baby that grows off of it that we break off the oha. And we're going to plant this, and it's going to have its own family, and it's going to create future generations. So this just continues to carry on. And what we do is we cut the leaf here.
We're still surviving. We're still here. So what are we going to do for the ones that come after us?
And this is what we eat, and this is what we plant. So this part of the plant here is called the ha, and ha is the breath of life that carries on. So very symbolic that this is our seedling that we plant over and over again.
Sustainability to most people is a function of what they value. People will sustain what they value, they'll work to sustain what they value, which is always some function of what they're familiar with.
We are modern humans, creatures of the Enlightenment, that great era 400 or 500 years ago where humans discovered their capacity for reason, where they blew away myths and superstition, where the earth became disenchanted. And so we recreated ourselves as rational creatures who could look around us, assess the world, study it, evaluate it, gather the facts, and work out how to transform the world, how to change things in our own interests.
A lot of us are raised to think that we have incredible power. I mean, we live in an affluent society, we have access to all this technology, we can sort of go where we want, we can get in our car, we can get information. But when you look at it, we really don't, we don't have a lot of autonomy in the sense that we rely heavily, almost entirely, on other systems for that power.
If one looks at the dynamics of CO2 and the latest facts from physics, it is very clear that the whole development of the Earth's climate will unfold in an uncontrollable and in a catastrophic way. We have already now waited too long. It's also not something that you can turn off like a boiling pot of water on your kitchen stove. Even if you turn it off, the development, the dynamics in our atmosphere will continue for centuries. Humanity lives in a severe state of self-denial, of self-deception, of repression of facts right now.
We just hope that what the scientists are telling us will happen. We simply hope that it won't. We're not enlightened creatures. We're subject to the same type of superstitious thinking, where our hubris overwhelms our capacity to reason.
Somebody says, you know, how much money are you saving for retirement? And you know, we can show you with numbers. Here's what a person, with your needs, your requirements is going to need for 20 years of retirement. How much are you saving? Oh, you're not saving anything. Wow. Like more and more Americans. Okay, how do you expect to get to retirement? They have no answer. They understand that they have no answer. They understand that they're going to be in trouble. It's as clearly as they can understand anything, and yet they're not changing their behavior. Why is that? It's because our rational brain is fully capable of grasping an abstraction like the future or the future with no money. Okay, you get that. But the part of your brain that motivates you, the limbic, the lizard brain, that part has no conception of the future. It totally can't understand anything beyond the here and now. And so you can talk until you're blue in the face about a problem, whether it's your lack of retirement money or the fact that water supplies are going to be insufficient for the number of people we're going to have, any number of sort of future-oriented problems. And part of your brain is going, yeah, that's terrible, that's terrible. And another part of your brain is going, I don't hear you. I don't care, I'm only interested in dealing with the here and now, and the here and now looks great.
Well, the old adage in the West is that whiskey's for drinking and water's for fighting. When the storms come off the Pacific Ocean and they hit the Sierra Nevadas, they're torn apart. Our best storms come out of Southern California anyhow. When the air currents can get between all the mountain ranges, and there's mountain ranges all across the state of Nevada. It's one of the most mountainous states there is, if not the most mountainous state. So by the time they get all the way to eastern Nevada, there's not much moisture left. Our annual rainfall is only about 8 inches. Water speculators are buying all the ranches all along the river, the Humboldt. They're buying everything up for the same reasons, for water, to go to the cities. It's a little bit intimidating, you walk up there and you sit down, and of course, when they had the pre-hearing in Reno, one whole side of the room was full of $1,000 an hour alligators or lawyers for the Southern Nevada Water Authority. I don't know what they get, but I mean, and a bunch of farmers on the other side arguing for their life, for the next generation. I wanted to draw as much attention, not to myself, but to the plight, to what was going on. Thus, when they said, how long will it take you to interview your witnesses, how many witnesses you got, and how much time, also I put down all my animals, all my horses, everything, and then wrote down that it'd probably take 30 days to interview them all, which the lawyers should have gone along with that because, they get paid by the hour.
We have this kind of defense mechanism where we forget and deny that things are difficult. For example, in California now, we are in our second drought year in what, pretty obviously, is going to be a drought cycle. And people are beginning to realize we have a problem. What they don't realize is that 1,000 years ago, we had droughts that lasted, or drought cycles, 100 years or more, when the snowpack in the Sierra was 45% of what it is today, and today it's low. And I've talked to water experts. Their biggest problem, they deliver the water, they're the people in the trenches. Their biggest problem is people denying that there are water shortages.
Every time they build a new hotel down there, what's the number one theme? They've got water parks, water slides, they've got a boat floating in a moat, they've got huge sprinklers or whatever those things are, the water shows at night. For God's sakes, I mean, it's a desert.
Our civilization, our society is facing a limit in what we can do. We haven't realized that yet, but there is this limit. And we're crashing against this limit. And it's going to be seen how we fare in doing this big transition, which will have to do with the limits we face, because we're really going into it without understanding what we're doing.
A little bit of our self-model is conscious. We can attend to it. Most of our self-model, controlling the body, is completely unconscious. And of course, one way to put the question is, what is it in the human self-model that now makes it impossible to act on the level of a species as a whole?
So we behave in ways that are rational, even though we don't consciously think about the causes and consequences of our behavior.
We're highly programmed to respond to certain categories of stimuli. Rewarding stimuli, and the more immediately rewarding, the more imminent the reward, the more compelling they are. Novel stimuli, threatening stimuli, sexual stimuli, signs of anger or aggression or threat. We have evolved to attend to these things.
It's called the mismatch hypothesis. There's a time lag between how the brain evolves and how society changes. At this point, we're left with brains that are similar to what they were on the eve of the agricultural revolution 12,000 years ago, and probably very similar to the way they were 250,000 years ago, but in a vastly different environment.
We're very alert and we have almost immediate responses. Our bodies are programmed either to find evasive responses if we perceive a danger, or to engage in courtship immediately if we think there is an opportunity for mating.
It's natural selection acting in every generation. Simply, those that leave many surviving offspring leave lots of copies of their genes. Those that leave few or no offspring leave few copies of their genes.
Organisms are predisposed to survive and to leave descendants.
scary to think about what has happened to the world population over the last 300 years. In the middle 1700s was perhaps 500 million, and it is now 7. The population, the world population, has increased by a factor of 10.
The way we live today is really a product of the last 200 years, partly coming from the Industrial Revolution, but very largely coming from the subsidies of fossil fuels that have allowed us to escape the constraints of current solar energy. And it's estimated that humans living under a solar energy regime can achieve a population density, a stable population density, of perhaps no more than 2 billion people.
The desire to have a higher income is fairly intense, even at the very high income levels that we have on average in the United States and Norway and other places that I know well. So that driving force, I think, is there and will remain there.
We grow more and more complex to solve problems. This is an escalation dynamic, and it's the same dynamic as in an arms race. In the world of complex systems, to use a colloquial expression, there's no such thing as a free lunch. Complexity always has a cost, and ultimately the cost is paid in terms of energy.
We've never had a year like this where it's been so dry and so hot, wildfires, record rainfalls other places. If they think it's going to keep getting worse on a relative scale to what we've seen this year, that's probably what may happen, and sort of a scary thing to think about.
Our lawyer's not the biggest liar, our weatherman's the biggest liar, because he'll tell us we've got 80% chance of rain and we get a sprinkle, and we get a 30% chance of rain, we'll end up with 2 inches of rain. We're flooded.
I've just been so close to breaking down and crying, and this is what, you know, is just really brings it on, is this pasture. I mean, there's really nothing of value here for a cow to eat.
And when these crops were at this stage last year, our wells were out of water. We were fighting tooth and nail just to try to keep these crops alive and keep them going, just to produce any kind of crop.
You know, it takes eons for topsoil to develop from decaying vegetation. One of my neighbors made the comment in his old rocky ranch that he had about 1 inch of topsoil that between him and starvation. And you have to protect it with the grasses and don't overgraze it. And we're totally dependent upon the rainfall.
Without dirt, I'm done. I'm over with. They might as well just go ahead and call people in, tell them to dig me a 6-foot hole, put me in a box, and call it good.
That's sort of the weather mantra in Central Texas: drought, 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 flood.
The term that everybody uses is just brutal. Where we would normally see honey stores and pollen stores for them getting ready for the upcoming winter time, there was nothing in there because all of the natural water sources had dried up. When drought affects our natural pollinators, it has a horrible effect on our environment and our food supplies.
It just sucks your soul dry.
Water is the new oil, and it's become a commodity just like oil rights and mineral rights used to be for Texas. And the competition is just going to get more intense as more and more people move here, and it gets hotter and drier and stays that way.
Responding to climate change in the area of farming is another arena in which society in the future is going to experience increasing costs and diminishing returns.
We know that the consequences of the industrialized world are going to place a great burden upon our children, and we have to do something now. But it does raise a question, even though we're aware of all these consequences, why are we still not radically changing our behavior?
The fact that we're culture creating individuals means that we create our own sense of psychology and our own sense of values and our own sense of what's important.
Vai in Hawaii means values. So you can see this is our values. This is what we value, the vai, the water, the source of life. What is important, what's going to sustain us, where the water is coming from, how the water is managed and used.
They have a legacy of the land that they inhabit, and they think of themselves as being part of the land, continuous in the land, and that therefore they should, what they do now really defines who they are.
We're creating the world that's creating us all the time.
What do we do by way of reproducing to have a culture that carries on in the future? We don't just produce babies, we send them to school, and we instill in them the norms of the culture and the knowledge of the culture.
The huge engine of consumerism was driving and became the economic and cultural raison d'etre of our lives as Americans, and the American dream became defined as what you owned, what you had.
And you start thinking, there's something wrong with the car I have, or the house I have, or the spouse I have. I mean, there is this sense of that we're entitled to the next best thing.
You know, we're socialized and we're existing in a cultural context. That cultural context shapes us and constrains us.
Strategic locations ensure repetition, and repetition creates consumer remembrance, driving home a message. Not once, not twice, but many times, thus bridging the gap between the manufacturer and the consumer.